Welcome to the Totally Honest Cooking Show where anyone can cook. Today we are making my apple crisp. Sometimes we call this the Beetus, sometimes we call this Wilford's Beetus, and today we're gonna make it. We're gonna start by preheating our oven to 350 degrees. And then we are gonna prep our apples. We're gonna start by making everything else and then putting our apples in and mixing them up, and it'll be fine. Starting with our spice blend, we're starting with 1 teaspoon cinnamon, 1 teaspoon allspice, 1 teaspoon of freshly ground nutmeg. If you're like me and you're anxious, you can keep your recipe next to you. This is our Totally Honest Cooking Show Wilford's Beetus recipe. It started many years ago at this point, like 15 years ago, as a all recipes recipe, but I've changed like 8 things, so it's no longer the same recipe. We're adding in 1 tablespoon of all-purpose flour. We're tossing in 1/2 cup of plain, ordinary, everyday sugar. 1/4 cup of water. 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, freshly squeezed. This will make it brighter, better flavor, all that, and it will stop the browning of the apples when we throw them in there to mix. Now we're gonna mix it all together. Realize that the spatula was not the best tool for that. Grab a whisk. Now you don't need to be as exact as I was with the lemon juice. You can probably just squeeze a whole lemon in there and it'll be fine. I was going to assemble the crisp topping next because that makes it flow a lot faster, but my butter is not softened yet. So I'm just gonna go ahead and peel and core my apples. Now there are a couple ways we can do this. One way is by coring it with our apple core. If you do it right, bam, your apple's cored. And I did a pretty good job that time around. Then you can just go like that. Embarrassing. Once your apple is fully naked, you can just start cutting away with your knife. The other option here, if you're feeling particularly lazy, you can get out your mandolin slicer if you happen to have one, put it on the thickest. You can get your adjustment to go so that it's approximately the same level of thinness as you would with a knife, and do it that way. I was planning to be that level of lazy today, but it looks like this is easier than I remember it being, so I'm just gonna do it this way. As you go, toss it in the bowl. And again, most of the recipes I encountered doing my initial research for this many years ago said thinly slice your apples. However, don't go nuts. You're not making apple chips. You're making an apple crisp. When we say thinly slice, we're looking for like this. Hold on. Let's find the camera. That. See? Not super thick. You can go thicker though if you're like, man, I don't care. You know. Because they're apples, they'll cook. Right? You might be asking me, Mark, what kind of apple should I use for this? Any baking apple will do. If you don't know what that means, then my recommendation would be just buy some Granny Smith apples from the grocery store. It'll be fine. Granny Smith apples cook up real nice. Don't just pick random apples though if you don't know what you're doing. There's a difference between baking apples and not baking apples. Baking apples, quote unquote, cook up. That means that their structure cooks in such a way that it will be like the pie filling that you're used to. Usually what this means is that you wind up with some structure in your apple. If you don't have structure in your apple, the whole thing falls apart, turns to mush. You don't want applesauce. You want apple pie filling. So that's why we use cooking apples for cooking. And you're going to want about 5 large grocery store style Granny Smith apples. Again, once you get a rhythm going, notice how it does speed up. As you go, stop and twiddle it around in your filling. Once you've finished slicing and dicing, give it a good mix, get it as incorporated as possible. We want to get this all over our apples. Then we're going to move it into a 13 by 9 pan that I've prepared with butter, because butter is delicious. We're going to spread it out like that. If you get to the end and you feel like you don't have enough apples, you can always dice some more up, throw them in there. Just make sure you spread them out because they stick together. Don't forget to scrape your bowl. Once that's done, we're going to start putting together our crisp topping. We're going to start with a 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, a cup of brown sugar. I usually alternate which ones I use. Light brown sugar has less molasses in it. If that matters to you, use your preferred amount. And then we'll add a cup of quick cook oats. And after that, we're going to add a teaspoon of cinnamon and a 1/2 cup of softened butter. Now we're going to take our wooden spoon. This is my favorite wooden spoon. His name is Bernie. And we're going to mix them all about. If the butter isn't soft enough, we can let it sit and come back. But I'm just going to work it. And we're going to cream the butter into the mixture. I recommend doing this until it's fully incorporated, or until everything starts looking kind of pebbly. Or you can just stop when your arm gets tired. Sometimes I do that. Honesty is important. Okay. Now we're just gonna... Oh, whoopsie doodle. What happened here is that I started narrating the part where you put the topping on before I put the caramel on. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to have a whoopsie doodle in this episode, because I've made this a billion times and this recipe is more or less mine at this point. Well, whoopsie doodle. So we're going to go ahead and make the caramel now. And then we're going to pour it on top, and then we're going to put the topping on. To make our caramel sauce, we're going to start with 1 cup of sugar over medium-low heat, we'll say. And your goal is to kind of keep it moving. Understand that when sugar caramelizes, you get to a really dangerous temperature, and you can easily burn yourself, and the sugar will adhere to you. Use a wooden spoon. It'll cook hot enough that it'll melt a plastic spoon. You don't want to melt your spoon. This is my second favorite spoon, the spoon with no name. I also have a 1/4 cup of butter and 3/4 cup of heavy cream and some salt. We'll get to those in a minute. This process will go faster if you preheat your pan. Notice that it's starting to melt. I walked away for 2 seconds. That's not something you should do when you're working with caramel. Caramel. We want to hold off on adding the butter until the sugar is most of the way dissolved. Again, I cannot emphasize this enough. Don't use a plastic spoon. I did that once. It was sad. You will notice that once it hits this phase, it breaks down a lot faster. And you do want to keep it moving because you don't want it to burn. If this were regular caramel and I weren't making a salted caramel sauce, I would tell you to add a squeeze of lemon juice. In fact, I have a little extra lemon juice behind me on the prep table. We're not going to do that because I'm adding the cream, and I don't think it's really necessary. once we've added the cream. I feel like the subtleties of it will get lost a little bit. Now it is mostly melted. We're just going to give it another couple seconds. And then we're going to add our 1/4 cup of butter. There we go. Notice that it does change rather rapidly once this is added. It gets a lot stickier. Well, I don't know if it gets stickier, but you notice the stickiness more, I guess, is my point. And it starts to take on the quality that you associate with caramel. And we're gonna let it simmer together for a minute. I'm now adding 2 teaspoons of kosher salt. I've never made this a salted caramel sauce before. In the past, I've just done a regular caramel sauce, but I was thinking, wouldn't salt make this nice? Good salty caramel. We're gonna sauce it up a little bit. This is 3/4 cup heavy cream, and we're gonna add it slowly because it can be kind of volatile. Don't add it all at once. Don't do anything that's going to make it sputter up and hit you. Again, we don't want any sugar burns. See? The original sauce recipe I had for this, I think called for like 1.5 cups, something like that. I decided that that was way too much. And that was from when I was just comparing recipes on the internet. We're just gonna let this cook a little bit. This is looking right to me, so I'm killing the heat. I'm gonna bring over my pan of apples. And now I'm drizzling. Try to be even about it. Once that's done, we will spoon our mixture over the top pretty as even as we can with the remainder of it. I did probably waste more than I intended to waste. Not that I intended to waste any of it, but you know what I mean. I wasted more than was the acceptable amount of waste. This show always does have a built-in, how much of this can I mess up feature. Part of my whole bag is, hey, anyone can do this. You can mess it up. You still have a great meal or dessert or snack thing. And there we go. Try to keep it as even as you can. It's not always possible. Now we're putting this in our 350-degree oven for 45 minutes. It'll be golden and bubbly. Also, don't treat this pan like you would frosting. You can't just eat it. Wait, let it cool a little bit. Then if it's still sauce-like, go ham on it. Okay, I'll be back in 45. 45 minutes later, it's time to pull it out of the oven. And you can see that it's looking crisp, it's looking bubbly. We're gonna need to give it a little bit of time before we can cut it, serve it, consume it, otherwise we'll burn ourselves. Apple crisp, straight out of the oven. This is the Beetus. This is one of my favorite desserts. I couldn't wait to tear into it, which is why it fell apart almost immediately. If you like little delicious squares, let it sit for 15 or 20 minutes first. I'm not going to. This pairs best with vanilla ice cream. I don't happen to have any on hand at the moment, but I will have a forkful and enjoy myself. I still have to make dinner. This is one of my favorite desserts for fall. I'm glad I got to share it with you. I'm going to say like, subscribe, click the little bell. I look forward to seeing you next week. Same time, same place. Remember, anyone can cook, including you. Bye.